I think that's the first time, Ollie, I've ever heard you lost for words, by the way, so yeah. Good morning, everybody. Traditional sports moving into esports isn't really a new thing anymore. It's been happening quite a lot over the last couple of years. But is it working? The purpose of this discussion this morning is to explore who are making the moves, who is actually benefiting, and to question if esports is a legitimate marketing vehicle for sports, who's doing it well and why. So quick introductions. My name is Duncan McMonagle. I run a company called Attention Sports and Media, and we basically help rights holders and brands bridge the gap in terms of working together. To my right, I've got Miguel Pacheco, who is International Business Development Manager for the mighty Celtic Football Club, the greatest football team in the world.
Bias.
And there's obviously no association or bias there at all. To his right, we have Brandon Smith, who is a FIFA esports caster and the founder of More Than Just a Game. To his right, we've got Malf Mins, founder and MD of Strive Sponsorship. And on the end, we have Martin Wyatt, Head of Partner Relations at Gfinity. So just for full disclosure, despite my accent, I am actually a lifelong Celtic fan. So Miguel, I'm saving all the easy questions for you, first and foremost. And Malf, I know you're a Liverpool fan, so you can get the stinkers at the end. Just a quick show of hands, just to warm everyone up. Who here actually supports a football team, a traditional real-life football team? Okay, pretty good numbers. Gentleman on the left, which team do you support? United. Manchester United. Oh, terrible start. And those that had their hands up, just pop them up quickly again. Out of you guys, who has watched a live PES or FIFA tournament? Okay, not bad. All right, so we know where our levels are. I don't know if, Ollie, you mentioned it, but if you guys have Slido and you want to ask any questions, please feel free to use that. But equally, it's a fairly small and informal room here, so just pop your hand up if you've got any questions. So Miguel, I'm going to start with you. For Celtic, so why esports? Was it the need to do something new and innovative? Was it kind of an effort to get after a younger demographic? What was the reasons for you entering, and how did you justify that back to the business?
Yeah, back to the question, why esports and why for Celtic? It's something we asked ourselves, to be fair, about 2 years ago. A couple of years ago, we decided to have a look because esports was causing a lot of noise. We were not just going to go and create an esports team for the sake of having an esports team. So we decided to run a sort of a test to see if there was actually an appetite from any of our fans to have a gaming side of things and related to the club. We decided to launch a very, very basic online FIFA tournament. Before we're making any decisions. It was actually quite successful in terms of our own expectations. We were probably hoping for a couple of hundred signups. We got over 1,000, and people really engaged with it. It was purely for fans of the club at that stage. We got Celtic playing against Celtic online, and the winner was going to go to a Champions League game in Germany. So it worked out well, and then that gave us enough reasons to say, let's look at seriously, and let's go out there and find out how can we make this a more formal effort. So we found the likes of Konami also, a challenger brand, really, wanting to make things happen differently. They had the idea of also starting and growing the esports side of things. So it was really harder for us. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. And what did you speculate you would get from the likes of working with PES and their league? And what have you actually found? What were your findings? So where did you benefit? What made it worth it? Will you continue to commit to sim football specifically? How did it work out?
I think for us we realized it's more of a diversification effort. Mm-hmm. So at the club in the past over the years, we've looked at different things. You know, it's as valid as having a basketball team, a netball team. You know, it could be anything different. You know, because we're not aiming to try and convert people who like gaming to be Celtic Football Club fans, but we would like to use the power of the brand, you know, to relate to a new audience that we might not have a connection with. So it's all about diversifying what we already have. It's not about necessarily trying to convert people to liking the game.
So the club don't look at it as an opportunity to get more bums on seats at Celtic Park or sell more jerseys. It's more about trying to find newer audiences in different areas and to kind of grow the brand around them rather than trying to bring it back to the core of the football. Is that right?
Exactly. You know, people at the club have done amazingly over the years. You know, so the football side of things is going very well, and it's always been, you know, 8 titles in a row. You know, all that is covered. You know, but there's another big opportunity for us in tapping into a different audience that. Like we recently engaged with some fans that might not even know the rules of the game. You know, it's as far as that. You know, so in another country where football is not a big sport, they might know it like any physical sport at all. You know, but that's not a reason not to relate to Celtic in some way.
Got it. Brandon, just moving to you briefly. So, having worked in radio and podcasts, both in real football and the virtual reality, what are the different ways that you think you need to approach content? Are these different audiences? Are they the same? Is there some crossover? How do you approach it?
It's a great question, yeah. So I've just come off a bachelor's degree of journalism as well for 3 years. So during that time, I was, you know, originally going about, I want to commentate on football. I want to try and travel around the world with it. And I was a huge FIFA player at the same time. And around that time, I got into opportunities with the likes of Martin with Gfinity, with EA Sports and FIFA. And to be honest, as a commentator, in my role as a play-by-play, as simple as it is, there's been a goal, Cristiano Ronaldo, blah, blah, blah. For me, that's exactly the same. But content that's putting out there, I think you don't have to change it too much in some ways. I think the beauty with FIFA and EA Sports is that, you know, if Messi goes and gets a hat-trick at the weekend, he's going to get a special foot item in FIFA the following week, and you can connect those 2 bits of content together straight away, what he's done in real life and what he's done in the game. It's as simple as it is, and that's why as an esports title, I feel like FIFA has got such a huge potential, you know, that we've already seen, plus going into the future when we've seen like the likes of the E-Premier League, 20 Premier League clubs, every single Premier League club having 2 players. You know, as you were saying, for example, like bringing new fans through, it's hard to explain for the content side of things. I'd say with what's already out there and these new special foot items and FIFA and esports, yes, you might have to tie it down to a younger audience in some ways, but overall, it's such a simple thing to do, and it's just you just mimic the 2 together.
But I guess despite the large participation levels of FIFA, from a viewership point of view, it's still, you know, the kind of the viewing numbers are relatively modest. So what is it that's being done from almost like a production point of view to make FIFA a better esports viewing experience?
Yeah, so I think, you know, it's easy to look into FIFA and say, where is it in the esports pyramid? You know, tier 3, is it tier 4, is it tier 2? I think you've got to look at the way that we only had the one competition. It was the FIFA Interactive World Cup, started in 2004. It was one tournament every year, and it was in 2017 that EA were like, right, we're going to back this as an esport. We're going to start putting some money into it. And then we saw kind of the re-emergence of the FIFA E-World Cup. Mm-hmm. Last year, we saw the E-Champions League. We saw the E-Premier League. Loads of these activations, virtual Bundesliga, La Liga, and, you know, to your question about how are these numbers getting approached, a lot of TV broadcasters are now jumping into it. It's not just Twitch that's streaming it. Sky Sports were involved in a few tournaments this year with Gfinity as well, such as the E-Premier League. They broadcasted the E-World Cup finals. So although in hindsight to a Dota, a League of Legends, we might not have the huge kind of like viewership. It is growing, and we're in a cycle which I'd probably say we're just coming out of our third proper year of pushing esports, going into our fourth. So there has been progression. It just might not be at the level of a tier 1 esport yet.
And you think that's been predominantly down to the actual publisher getting involved and pushing it and looking at esports as an avenue themselves to grow? Yeah,
most definitely. And as I was saying, the Call of Duties, those League of Legends, they've been around for years, and they've had the time to try things out with the season. Like for FIFA, we're still trying to work out what our esports calendar should be. How many events should we have? Last year, we probably may have had one too many with all of the leagues, all of the major tournaments, but there's definitely been an increase in viewership, and it will only continue to go that way, in my opinion.
Okay. Martin, how do Gfinity view it? Because obviously you've got experience of working with, working across sports sims and core gaming titles.
Yeah.
So legacy with FIFA and working with the Premier League, working with F1 esports now.
Yeah. I think the FIFA thing, just to finish that point off about the viewership, is interesting because it's modest in comparison to participation. If you measured esports by the number of players that play them, then FIFA would very much be at the top for the way that their ecosystem is structured. So it's growing, it's successful, and it could be one of the biggest. There's no doubt about that. But our role primarily with major sports rights holders has been to help them enter the esports industry, access gamers, work sensitively and credibly with games in order to achieve what their goals are. So the sort of 3 main partners we've done that with, most notably, would be Formula 1, obviously the Premier League last year, and we're also doing just some consulting with IndyCar about how maybe they enter as well. So the interesting thing is that the goals are all, they all start from the same place, is that they see that esports is big, they hear the numbers, they get excited, they want to know about how they get involved. So our job primarily is to tell them the best way to do it and the worst way to do it. So Miguel and I were talking about it just before the panel started. The worst thing that anyone can do, be it brand, sports rights holder, even game developer, is to rush into esports too quickly and expect it to go bang, because it just won't do that. You'll spend a load of money, you'll view it as a failure, you'll never come back. So we work very much in a kind of end-to-end integrated way with the rights holder and we'll work backwards. We'll say, what is it you want to achieve? Is this about fan engagement? Is this about attracting new fans? Is there a commercial angle for your existing suite of partners? And then we will build a program alongside those partners to deliver those goals. So, and our role will be primarily as a tournament operator, which is primarily the role we played for the E-Premier League, and then we worked alongside Sky to deliver the broadcast, EA to deliver the tournament. For Formula 1, we very much are end-to-end in that we've designed the whole thing from kind of soup to nuts. We execute the whole thing from soup to nuts, including the live broadcast, which we then help and work with Sky to distribute. So our role varies, but one thing that we're always very, very passionate about and we're very vocal about is that all roads have to lead back to the game. All roads have to lead back to the communities. So you have to be sensitive to those communities in order to be credible. If you're credible, you'll be successful, provided you don't rush and you don't expect the world too quickly. So that's kind of primarily our role. And what we're seeing is that as you're starting to see these sports rights holders repeat their involvement. So, for example, Formula 1 is in its 3rd year, and it's grown year on year in terms of participation at the online qualification end, all the way through to the viewership on both Twitch, Facebook, and Sky Sports. And then when they've distributed it internationally, it's growing. So it is very much a successful route for traditional sports. And the panel's about, is it a credible, viable esports entrance, or is it just PR? Actually, in some cases, it's both.
Okay, fair enough. I guess back to Miguel's point, so from Celtic's point of view, it wasn't about trying to get new audiences back to the core, but actually just be where they are and expand the brand. Yeah. What about for the rights holders? Because they obviously have huge legacy audiences around kind of the real game.
Yeah.
How did you work? Are they interested in kind of leveraging that existing F1 audience, for example, to convert them in? Or is it about more, let's just focus on the sim racing audience and let's galvanize them around the F1 product, because there's a lot of sim racing titles out there, right?
Well, our opinion very much is that it would be remiss to try not to get them to cross over, because there's value in both. Yeah. So one needs the other, for example, with with Formula One, I think a lot of the success we've seen with Formula One is that actually it doesn't just, from a viewership perspective, attract sim racing fans. It doesn't just attract F1 fans. It attracts motorsport fans, and that's where we're seeing that growth come from, which where we actually think is quite interesting. And so it always comes back to kind of what is it that the rights holder actually is looking to achieve, because the solutions that we end up designing are there to deliver those goals. We met with Major League Soccer a while back, and they told us some crazy stat which I can't remember, but it was a very, very high percentage of new fans of the Major League Soccer and its teams directly come through the game, and that's why it's always important to tie it back credibly to the game and the community to keep you honest. There's no point in trying to shoehorn. So, for example, there would be no point in Formula One trying to run the Formula One Esports series away from the Formula One game.
Right.
It would make no sense for the brand.
Yeah.
It would make no sense for the community, and it would make no sense for that wider fan base to find a way in.
That was a great stat not to get quoted on, by the way.
Well, that's why I didn't give the number.
I can't remember what the stat is, but bear with me.
It's massive. I can't remember. I'd say it if I could remember, but a long time ago.
And just on racing sims generally, because a lot of people don't know about how big the participation levels are in racing sims.
Yeah.
And even some of the titles like iRacing and R-Formula, etc. Like they have literally hundreds of thousands of people actually watching people driving there.
Yes.
But is that a challenge to the F1 group, for example? Is there a need for them to try and galvanise all of these kind of fairly fragmented communities around the Codemasters F1 title? Is it better served, and is there a better way to grow the kind of the sim racing audience as a whole by the actual publisher themselves working, with the rights holder to develop that?
I don't think they have to worry about it. I think that there's enough of. I think the way that it should be approached is that if you looked at motorsports, esports as a whole, then there is probably a common sense way to work out how to grow that entire thing, which means that Formula One can succeed. The Forza Racing Championships can succeed, iRacing, etc., can all exist and succeed and grow in their own way. Because actually, I think if you're a motorsport fan, 9 times out of 10, you'll probably watch at least one other motorsport. If there are some die-hard Formula One fans that will only watch Formula One, but probably a large proportion of them will watch another motorsport. And I think if you take that approach to it, then you stand a much better chance of growing the entire thing. So I don't think Formula One need to be worried about the Forza Racing Championship, and I don't think the Forza Racing Championship needs to be worried about the Formula One Esports Championship, because they're both very, very different and they both have huge potential.
Fair enough. And from a marketing point of view, because obviously Gfinity work across titles, across core and kind of sim, does it make it easier to go to sponsors with a sim title, something that broadly CMOs and marketing people understand better, than it is to go with Rocket League or Street Fighter V, for example, which you guys covered in your Elite series?
Yeah, in most cases, yes, it's a safer bet, I think, for some people who are a bit worried about blood and wizards. Don't necessarily understand it, but they can get their heads around cars and football, which is why Rocket League's fun, because it's both. So it's definitely, I think, an easier way to start the education. FIFA's huge, Formula One's huge, so it's definitely an easy way to start the education with CMOs and kind of brand managers that aren't necessarily sort of used to esports and used to the gaming industry. But it shouldn't. It's not the only. I think now there's so much data and there's so much information around esports that people are hopefully starting to look beyond the violent games, the scary kind of things. We can't get behind these because that's not necessarily the case. But is it easier as a first conversation? Yeah. Are they the first games they want to talk about? Yeah. Mm.
All right, Malf, coming to you. So obviously Strive have worked with a multitude of traditional kind of sports rights holders, the ECB, World Rugby, etc. Without naming names, would you say the rights holders broadly entering into esports, are they doing it with the right intentions? Is this a knee-jerk reaction from the board asking questions, what are we doing in esports? Like, how do you feel, how prepared do you think they are to actually strategically go after esports as a genuine marketing vehicle for them?
So before I answer, just to give you a bit of context, Strive, we work advising brands on their broader marketing, what to sponsor, how to sponsor. Been doing it for about 19 years in sport and about 3.5 years in esports. We also work with commercial rights holders on building value and investors, so advise investors on what to invest in and those raising capital. To Duncan's point, I guess our pertinent experience is working with brands like Coots, World Rugby, ECB, Badminton World Federation, all in esports and gaming more broadly, and then people like Game, Belong Gaming Arena, Insomnia, Gfinity. In answer to your question, Duncan, I think there's no one answer. There's a whole raft of different reasons people are entering esports, and I think and gaming. There's certainly fear of missing out. There's certainly the board are asking us what our esports strategy is, so we need an answer. There's certainly, well, my competitors are doing it, so I feel like I need to do it. In terms of strategic, thought-through approaches, sadly, in my personal experience, there's not as many of those.
There's an education.
There's an education, and I think, I think part of our role as being in the industry is to help that process.
Yeah.
So if we use World Rugby and the ECB as two examples of that, actually two very strategic organisations, and my client at ECB was a chief strategy officer, my client at World Rugby is a chief commercial officer, ex-Man United, very ex-EA partnership, so they're very clear on stuff. But the conversation there is very much, let me talk to you about esports and gaming, because there's a huge confusion still within the sports area about esports and gaming. And to Martin's point about participation and fandom, I have a bit of a cycling background. I call gaming, I ride my bike. I call esports, I watch people race their bike.